Hello everyone, welcome to my first live presentation. I enjoy all different types of art techniques, and I just wanted to just give you a brief clip of a piece that I'm currently working on for one of my classes. So I teach online as well as in-person classes. My website is riverafineartstudio.com, and I have ongoing classes there. This is one that is a combination of colored pencil and pastel on toned paper. So I just wanted to talk briefly about one of the things that I really enjoy about colored pencils, particularly the Faber-Castell Polychromos color pencils, is that you can create very, very fine detail. And I'm going to just go ahead and start working right now on an area to show you exactly what I mean. So what you want to do with these pencils is you have the ability to sharpen them up to a really, really fine point. I'm actually going to sharpen this one a little bit more. And with a lot of colored pencils, they're a bit waxier and they dull very quickly. I've noticed that the points, really stay intact with these pencils, and it allows for very, very careful shading. One of the challenges is that it's harder to smooth out your shading because you have to do it carefully. You're not going to do it through blending. So it is kind of a slow process, but what I like to do is just build my colors up in very fine layers. So I'll just take the tip of that pencil and I'll fill in the tooth of the paper very slowly. I'm not going to be applying much pressure. I'm going to build the colors up slowly. Okay, so this little section of the chin here, I'm noticing is a bit pinker. I've already laid a few colors down. So I have orange and actually a little bit of green. And now I'm just concentrating the red to create a pinker tone. But I'm still not applying it with much pressure. And this is really careful and slow. This is how I like to work with these pencils. The reason that I'm using the pastel in addition to the colored pencils is, one, it's a little bit faster. So if I want to, fill an area in a little bit more quickly, I can actually layer the chalk pastels right over the pencils, or I can layer the pencil over the chalk pastel. So that's one huge advantage. It saves you a little bit of time, but also it covers the paper a little bit more. So if I have opaque areas, particularly in the lights, for example, the pastels are going to cover up more of the paper. And same is true of colors. If I want to strengthen certain colors, I can use pastels. And I really enjoy layering that over the colored pencil, although you can do it the other way around. I'll kind of build up my darker tones, my midtones and so forth, and then I'll use the pastel to add my lights. But there's a little dimple in the chin here, so I'm just going over that area with my red. And there's more of a transition through here. One of the keys when you're working on flesh tones is you really want to look at the transitions between the lights and the darks. And you also want to look at the color shifts. So I'm noticing more pink transitioning into the light. It gets a little bit lighter right here. just going to slowly add that gradient. And then just to show you what the pastels can do for the light areas, so I have, this area which I've already used my white color pencil on, but I can only go so far with that. So for the true highlights, like the highlights on the nose, the highlights on the lips, I can use the pastel. And I have one right here, which is almost completely done, but I've sharpened it up to a nice point. And I can just go ahead. This is a chalk pastel. And I can lay down the stronger highlights. So this area of the chin, there's a fairly strong light right here. It's not as strong as the highlight on the nose. But what I can do is just lay my light down like so. And I'm just using little hatched lines. And then I can blend it. So there's several ways of blending this. You can use a brush, which is one of my favorite tools when I'm working with pastel. Okay, so any type of a brush, a soft bristled brush is ideal. I like using watercolor brushes. This is a filbert. And I can just go ahead and smooth that out very easily. So for the softer highlights, I can do that. And then I could just keep layering it. If I wanted to strengthen that again, I'd go back over it with the pastel. You will notice that it dulls a little bit as I blend it, because it's pushing the particles into the paper. It's actually dispersing them a little bit more as well. So you're seeing the gray of the paper coming through. If you get a little excess powder, like what I'm seeing right there, you can just blow on it. And then, because this is such a light layer, I can actually go back and modify the color with the colored pencil again. So this is a little bit too white, too pale. I see a little bit more pinkness in there. So I can just go back with my red and just very, very lightly work the red over top of the pastel. If you'd like to learn more about these techniques, I do, as I said in the beginning, I offer a lot of classes. So I have ongoing classes on my website. And the address for that is riverafineartstudio.com. Please feel free to drop any comments that you'd like. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Make sure you like and subscribe. Okay, I'm just strengthening the pinker tone still. And one of the things that I do want to talk also about is, what colors you can use when you're working on flesh tones. So essentially you have warm tones. You have reds, yellows, oranges, colors of that nature. But one of the things that is really, really important to understand is that you can create the illusion of round form by varying your warm and your cool colors. So I'm just going to point out what I've done here in some of these areas, but you can see, for example, right here in the cheek, I have some pink. And there's a very gradual transition into a green tone. A lot of times you will see green tones when you're looking at portraits or figurative art. you get that transition, that cooler transition before you get to the light. So it goes from a warmer shadow mass over here into a slightly green tone and then into the light. And you really see that happening throughout the face. You see more of that green in this area. You see a little bit more green in the transition in the nose here. So that's really, really important to look for those cool tones. If I was using just warm colors, it would actually flatten out the appearance of the form. So I'm essentially doing that again with layers. So I'm kind of layering the green into an area, but I'm not ending it abruptly. I'm transitioning that green into the light, and I'm also transitioning it back into the shadow. And then when I get deeper into the shadow, I'm picking out my warmer colors. So in this case, I'm going to actually switch to a brown because I see a bit more brown in this area over here. So I have the green that I've already worked in. I've got a couple of layers already down of orange and violet. And now I'm just deepening the shadow by going over it with brown. But I want to hold off on going too dark too soon. So I'm really making sure that I'm not going too hard with my pressure. And I'll just build that darker tone up slowly. So the mass of the cheekbone or the zygomatic arch is what we're seeing here. And it's dropping this area into slightly deeper shadow. And I'm also always looking for ways to unify shadow shapes together. You never want them to end abruptly. You almost want one shadow to kind of modulate or melt into another shadow shape. And then I'm trying to keep the edges and the transitions very, very soft. The details are the last things that I add. So things like freckles, which you see I've started doing here. I really usually try to wait until I have all of my shadows worked out before I start looking at the surface details or the surface textures. But this is a real-time video on my YouTube channel. I show a lot of these techniques as time-lapse videos because they do take a while. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how long this takes in actual time. It's a very time-consuming process, but it's really worth the effort. You want to make sure that you're not rushing with this technique. You'll get much smoother transitions if you take your time. You want to also always have a strong or a sharp point on your pencil. And I can just take this whole area and slowly start to knock it down into a more brown tone. But that's a little bit too brown. So then I'll go back with a lighter, warmer brown. It was a little too cool, I should say. Starting to look a bit more gray. So now I can warm it up with another color. And it's all about the layers. It's all about layering one color over another. I'm not doing a lot of blending with the pencils in this drawing, although you can slightly blend them if you use a shader. The other tool that I really like to use is this painting tool. This is called a color shaper, and it has a flexible nib. So it doesn't really eat the paper up as much as a shader would. You might find that this will smooth the tones out just a little bit. I'm not gonna get a lot of smoothing out because This is not a waxy pencil, but I can perhaps smooth that out just a little bit. And I can do that in between layers if I want to, or I can layer them and then just do it at the end. Either way is fine. This area in here is a little bit too gray. So I'm just going to show you a slightly faster way that I can adjust that color using the pastel. So I'm going to take this really brilliant pink color, and this is what's so wonderful about using these mediums together, is that if you're applying your colors translucently, you can get so much depth and so much nuance, even if you're using stronger colors. So for example, I can take my pastel and just graze that right over the surface very, very lightly. And then I can blend it and I can shift that whole shadow into a slightly pinker tone. It also fills in some of the graininess. So the pastels will blend, whereas the colored pencils won't blend quite as easily. Pastels are extremely easy to blend. And I can just warm that up very quickly. So it's kind of a nice alternative. And it does expedite the process a little bit. I have a little bit more reflected light over on this side. Gets a bit lighter in value, so I'm going to take my white pastel and create that transition. And then I can blend that. And I can also come back with my white color pencil and fill in some of the gaps that I might have missed. So the pencils and the pastels, they work in perfect harmony to one another. Where one is lacking, the other sort of picks up where one lacks, if that makes sense. I went a little bit too pink here, so I'm going to come back with some green. And green and pink or green and red are complementary colors, so when you combine them, they actually tend to neutralize each other. So if I wanted to make this pink a little less vibrant and a little more neutral, I could simply come back over it with some of this green color. And you can see how that does gray it out just a little bit. Not too much, but just a little bit. And I'm going to keep working on this shadow. I have probably 3 or 4 layers of color already put down here. And I'm just going to keep building it up. You know, colors in the shadows. Shadows are so beautiful when it comes to a portrait. Or any type of figurative piece. We don't want to kill the shadows. We don't want to make them too gray or too dull. We want to really look at those subtleties of color. There's really a luminosity and a beautiful appearance in the shadows that we can retain if we are working in thin layers like this. Trying to not go too dark too quickly is important, but rather look for the color and build that up slowly. And then the shadows are going to have almost like an inner glow or an inner light, which is really important. That will give life to your subject. So I'm going to just work for a little bit longer today. If you have any questions at all, please feel free. You can type them in the chat, or you can just add them into the comments below. I'm happy to answer questions. I really do love just talking about art, different techniques. My training is very academic, and I really worked primarily as a painter. I work in oils as well. And later on, I started getting more into colored pencil and pastel and so forth. But a lot of these techniques can also be applied to oil painting. I'm going to add a little bit more pink right in here. And you can see how strong that color is when you first put it down. But you can just very easily blend it. And we get what I refer to as optical color effects, because we have the layers. We have one layer showing through the other, which modifies the color. Like as soon as I blend it, what's actually happening is the gray and the darker tones are coming through the pink, which is what's causing that to look more dull. So it's through the process of layering that we create our color. And I think that's really, really important to understand. I'm not going to find an exact color match in my set, so I have to create that color through layers. I'm just working on this transition a little bit more, making this a bit softer. All right, so I'm going to just go a few more minutes here. Please feel free to ask questions if you have any, but I'll probably wrap this up in another 3 or 4 minutes. If you are interested in my classes, please feel free to go to my website. I have a list there of classes which I offer. I do have to update it with current classes. I'll probably do that within a day or two. But I will have some starting up next month. Now for something like the freckles, one thing that's really important, I've talked about this in some of the other videos on my channel, but when we're looking at surface details, you want to make sure that that always adheres to the general light and shadow. So my freckles in the light section are going to appear lighter in value. So let's say I have some freckles, in this area. I'm going to use my lighter brown because they're getting washed out by the light, right? So I could just take that lighter brown and I could start working out some of those details. But as I move into the shadow, they're going to appear quite a bit darker because they're in the shadow. So then I would switch to my darker brown and I can just really start creating all sorts of interesting shapes. I want to make sure that they're not going to be the same size or the same width. And that's going to help to make it look more organic. Can also vary the darkness. They're not all going to be quite as distinctive. Some are going to be a little bit lighter than others. All right, so I'm just going to pull out now so you can see. This drawing. I'll probably have a few more updates on this as it develops. I do want to devote a lesson to the hair, so I'll try to post that within the next week or two. But if you're interested in this content, please do feel free to subscribe. I'm going to try to start doing more live presentations. And if you're interested in more of, class content where I get even more specific about my materials, please check out my website. Once again, that's www.riverafineartstudio.com. I also have an online school of classes, and that is on my Thinkific channel. I'll post that in the link below. But thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully I'll see one of you guys in one of my classes. Oh, I just got a question from Beanbug. How long does it usually take to complete one of those? Great question. It takes anywhere from, say, 100 hours to like 250 hours. This piece is fairly small in scale. This is 11 by 14. So I expect this will take probably about 150 hours or so. I've already put in a good probably 30 hours so far. So you can get a sense based on what I've already done. But if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to end the video here. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you guys down the road. Thank you.